I'm being joined by the Professor of Finance and Capital Market. He is also the President of the Association of Capital Market Academics of Nigeria, Professor Uwaleke. Prof, good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining the program this Friday afternoon.
Good afternoon, Tolu. Always my pleasure.
Now, Prof, where do we start from? I think there's a big one. Federal government is saying now that there will be tax breaks for companies to be able to employ more staff. And let's understand this, because this is also an intervention. We've seen series of interventions in recent times. Now, what would you say about this very move, and how does it help the real sector of the economy?
Well, for now, we still don't know the details. I'm sure your question is premised on what the coordinating minister for the economy mentioned the other day. But on the surface, of course, it's going to be positive for businesses. Fiscal incentives are usually positive for businesses. And I'm happy to hear that the executive order in that respect would soon be signed. The minister said he will be signing the I think the executive order maybe on behalf of the federal government. So is a positive development, and of course coming alongside the waiver, 150-day import waiver for essential food items, rice, wheat, maize, and the likes, including the incentives, again fiscal incentives, waiver to that we have. We're also going to see on pharmaceuticals. I understand all of that will form, part of the executive orders that will be coming out. The president will be expected to, assent to. So, in all, I think they will be positive for, SMEs. And if you also take that alongside the interventions by way of, again, what the president disclosed in his speech, the fact that 75,000, businesses are being processed, beneficiaries of the 1 million naira grants that the government, is going to be giving. Again, all the grants for nano businesses. We understand 600,000 nano businesses, have so far benefited, from the grants. I'm sure the grant in question, is the one to do with the 50,000 naira that was meant to, to be given to 1,300 nano businesses, that's one-man businesses, across the 774 local governments, we have in this country. So I think all of that package, in my view, will make some impact. But again, what I would love to see, with respect to these interventions, I would love to see scale. I would also love to see speed. When I say scale, I'm referring to the fact that if you look at our country today, we have, it's estimated that we have nearly 40 million, SMEs, okay, micro, small, and medium enterprises. And out of the 40 million, or even a lot more, okay, over 90% of that, would fall under nano and micro businesses. So, so when you look at that number, the fact that we have millions of businesses in that category, nano businesses, then 600,000 would just be like a drop, in an ocean. So scale is important when we are doing interventions, and of course the channel of distribution, especially when we want to reach the real nano businesses, the channel of distribution, the right targeting to, is very important.
Prof, I think it's a good way to start our conversation as usual, and I like to take it further, like getting your understanding of palliatives and interventions of government. We heard Mr. Bismarck Rwani talking about the rice, alleging that in some cases, some are buying at that 40,000 naira and selling higher than that. What do you make of government palliatives? 570 billion has been given to state subnationals, a lot of expectations. So what is your understanding, and what kind of palliatives do you think government need to get into that would really get to those that need this support?
Okay, yeah, Tolu, that's a very good question. Permit me to even start it from a theoretical perspective. Principles of public expenditure, the very prominent one there, we all learn, in school, is the principle of maximum social benefit, maximum social welfare. So what that means, in simple terms is, if you have 1 naira to spend, for example, you're asking yourself, how do I ensure that this 1 naira is, for the benefit of a greater number of people, for the maximum benefit of a greater number of people, okay? And that's also why, if you want to implement any policy, or if you have any program to implement, okay, you're also looking at, I talked about scale initially. You're also looking at the number of people that will be affected by that program in a country of 220 million people. So you should be more particular about how many people are also being affected, by that. Well, why am I saying all this? The idea of palliatives, again, it's not as that's one can also argue that under the circumstance we find ourselves, it's important to find how to ameliorate the sufferings, of people. But in doing that, as I mentioned earlier on, the channel is important. Scale is also important. When you don't have that scale, sometimes it will even appear, it will appear better to look for alternatives of doing that. You talk about rice, distribution. We had the government was distributing 20 trucks of rice. That's they say it's about 12,000 bags of rice. So you are doing that to each state of the federation. So I use my state as an example. You bring 12,000 bags of rice to Imo State, for example, where you have 27 local governments and 305 maybe wards. Okay, if you divide 20,000 bags, 40 kg or 50 kg or so, you now divide the 12,000 by 305, over 300. You get maybe 39, 40 bags, per ward. And in my place, for example, a ward comprises 3 communities. So, and if you now take that to the 40 bags or so to the 3 communities, where you have you'll at least get more than 100 people who are vulnerable. The real vulnerable will be more than 100 in that community. So you end up sharing, of course, something that is far, far less than a bag of rice, maybe half bag or mudu or cup of rice, to people. So when you now come to think of it, what impact has that made? So now the fact that is alleged that people are reselling, tells me that maybe the rice, didn't even get to the real people. Because if the rice got to the real vulnerable people, I from what I've just analyzed to you now, I don't see a situation in which one person will get a one bag, except a number of people, would be excluded. But if you were to share that among the vulnerable people in an area, one person might not really get a bag. So if somebody is getting a bag or 2 bags or 3 bags and reselling, it tells me that the real people, are not actually getting this, bags of rice. So for me, there should have been an alternative way of doing it. And maybe the cash thing would have even been better if it is well targeted. If you give somebody, for example, 5,000 naira, okay, in the rural area, a vulnerable person, okay, I'm sure it would have been better. The person would have preferred it to collecting maybe a mudu of rice or a cup of rice. Now, why do I say that? Now, you give the person a cup of rice. What does he do with it? He or she do with it? He has to cook it, and he has to also look for money to, make the meal. But collecting 5,000 would mean you give the person a choice as to whether to use the part of the money to spend on meals that are considered cheaper, or that are even cheaper in the rural areas. Okay, so that's one thing. But looking at the interventions, holistically, I would say the government has made some appreciable impact in some areas. One area I think we are also going to see some level of impact appreciable impact is going to be in the area of transport, because the cost of transport is what is feeding into the high cost of goods and services. All right, transport cost is feeding into inflation, and with the government CNG initiative, okay, I think in the medium to long term, it's going to help to bring down transport. And the president mentioned it in his speech. Looking at a 60% reduction in transport costs. But what's more important even to me is the fact that it's also going to help us save money, because the president talked about 2 trillion. Okay, I hope I'm right. 2 trillion naira every month that we spend on importing petroleum products into this country. So with the CNG initiative, all right, where you have CNG buses going to come in, already they're talking about distributing 1 million CNG kits. And the good news yesterday, I saw the CEO of Innoson Manufacturing Limited, Innoson Automobile Car Manufacturing Limited, with the president, saying that the CNG buses will soon be ready. So I think it will go a long way to bring down the cost of transport. But again, in doing so, I want to advise too that apart from the buses, okay, there should also be a provision to also accommodate CNG-powered trucks, CNG-powered utility vehicles, pickup vans, small trucks that can also, convey, agri products in particular from the farms, to the markets, okay, because that's very important. Because the buses will only serve to convey people, but we also need CNG-powered utility vehicles that will convey goods, because that is what will really bring down the cost of transport. So on the part of CNG, I think that's kudos to the government. On the part of these the other interventions, again, another one that easily comes to mind is this the NEF fund, the students' loans scheme. Again, in this aspect, I want to say I heard the president talk about processing, I think 45.6 billion, naira in respect of that. Of course, he also said that additional 50 billion, would be added. Okay, so scale is important when you're doing that. But I also want to recommend here that apart from the student loan scheme, it's very important that another component of that, student assistance or access to higher education, because that's the objective. Another component is also introduced. And what is that component? The scholarship component. Okay, scholarship scheme for particularly some targeted or specialized courses. Okay, that will go a long way. Today we are talking about food insecurity. I think the government can also, as part of the national master plan, okay, as part of the government's efforts to boost agriculture, particularly when the government is now talking about targeting 10 million hectares of land. I'm sure you saw that in the president's speech, 10 million hectares of land. We have a country where the entire land, agric land area, okay, we hear, according to the Food and Agriculture FAO, we hear is 79 million hectares. Out of the 79 million hectares, only 36.9 million hectares are arable. And out of the 36.9 million hectares that are arable, just 6 million that is just being cultivated. So the government says they want to be ambitious, they want to do 10 million hectares target. So that's very good. And I'm saying one way to achieve that is also to ensure that we don't rely on subsistence farming to be able to do that. Okay, so it's about mechanized agriculture. Okay, not necessarily involving number, but involving the technical people that will produce these goods. So the yield is what is important here, and that is what will be powered by mechanized agriculture. And how do we drive that? In my view, the government can have this scholarship scheme that will enable students pursuing agri-science and related programs in universities and our colleges, to put them on scholarship scheme. And before they graduate, also have an institution, okay, and that's also where the Bank of Agriculture comes in, or financing arrangement that will ensure that they get facilities, they get loans, as groups, as cooperatives, because as they're finishing, they're identifying themselves and they're coming together to register companies, so that as soon as they finish, they assess these loans and they can start this agri thing on a very large scale. What we need to achieve food security in this country is large-scale farming, mechanized farming, and not just subsistence, agriculture. And as I'm saying, my point is that our universities can drive that. The government will need to, pursue a deliberate effort to have scholarship programs for those studying agriculture. Tolu, I feel sad when I come across, students studying agriculture in the university, and they tell me, that they have one challenge or the other. As a matter of fact, I even saw one that said it dropped out. Okay, somebody that gained admission to study agriculture in the agric science in the university, dropping out on account of the fact that he was unable to not just pay fees, but also to take care of himself in school. So there should be a deliberate effort to ensure that such people don't drop out, because, as I said earlier on, these are the people we actually need if we have to achieve food sufficiency in this country. And the idea of also ensuring that as soon as they finish, they also are also into something with some loans is important, because if you don't do that, they end up also doing things that they are not, trained to do. You find them looking for money in the bank, looking for jobs in the banks, and so on. So it's important to have a program to be focused and to say, if we want to achieve food security by 2025, 2026, we need to do ABC, okay, with respect to, agriculture. So the idea of student loan scheme is good, as I said earlier on, but there should be a component that will be for, scholarship for pillar courses, agri-science, engineering, medicine, and IT. For me, that's my recommendation, particularly agri-science and agri-related, programs. Now, there's also the intervention to do with businesses. Again, I commend that. The idea of, I mentioned that, earlier, the nano businesses and the one for, small and medium. But again, we need scale to be able to do that. And government should also quickly be thinking of how to, resuscitate, if you like, or recapitalize some of the development finance institutions, because that's actually their job. The central bank is saying it doesn't want to be involved in development finance. It doesn't want to be involved in such interventions any longer. Therefore, there is need to ensure that development finance institutions are, up and doing. Particularly the Bank of Agriculture. Whatever we need to do to, revitalize that Bank of Agriculture, I think this is the time to do that. I heard the CBN governor saying at the time that even if they have to intervene, it has to be through development finance institutions. That's fine. But the development finance institutions, apart from the Bank of Agriculture, you can't speak of any other one that is really, really thriving. So that should also be, priority. If we must, get it right in terms of production, if we must also bring down inflation. And I'm happy. Part of what I'm saying now, I expect to see them in the inflation reduction program that the government, I understand is about to roll out.
Prof, 2-3 minutes we have to wrap up this segment of the show. Revenue on the fiscal side has improved, according to the president. I want you to tell us the fundamentals around this. 9.1 trillion naira first half of the year. Debt service, 98%, around 97, 90%. Now is about 67, 68%. Let's wrap up on that note. What are the fundamentals around this?
Well, fundamentals, there's no running away from the fact that one of the factors that drove this revenue increase happens to be the devaluation of the naira. Okay, so we have to put it in context. With devaluation, the 3 tiers of government are sharing, huge money that they were not doing before. But that aside, let me also admit that yes, efforts have been made to ramp up revenue. Recently, the major government revenue collecting agencies have reported increase in revenue as a result of improvements in collection efficiency and their effort. Talking about the customs, talking about the federal inner revenue service, they've all improved revenue collection, and the same thing goes for government independent revenue. Independent revenue has also improved, again, largely on account of this measure the government introduced in the Finance Act, this upfront deduction, from their gross receipts. Okay, so that's also one. But again, on the oil side, there is also the good news that, yes, one can also point to some improvements in oil production. Oil production has steadily increased from what it used to be to what we hear now, 1.6 million barrels per day. So following increase in oil production and with favorable oil price, yes, oil revenue, has also increased. And the good thing is that this increase in revenues, have also helped, just as the president noted, to bring down the the debt service to revenue ratio from what it used to be as high as 98% to now less than 70%. I think as last year, 69%. So the debt service to revenue has reduced majorly on account of increase in revenue. So I think that's commendable.
I must thank you so much. Professor Uwaleke is a professor of finance capital markets, president of the Association of Capital Market Academics of Nigeria, also the director, Institute of Capital Market Studies, Nasarawa State University. Professor Uwaleke, enjoy your weekend and thank you for your time as always.
Thank you so much, Tolu.